Good morning. It is Thursday, September 26th at about 6:15 in the morning. My name is Larry Cedar, and I'm back with you for another session on Sqanning, spelled Sqanning. It is a completely made-up word referencing the actual word scanning, as in scanning the body. Scanning, by my definition, is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. It's very simple. All we do with scanning is focus on releasing muscular tension. I have been searching my whole life for answers. I know most of us do. Many books on all sorts of practices, Eastern, Western, whatever. And several years ago, I settled upon this technique, which I would like to call an invention of my own, but it's merely a distillation of many familiar ideas that are held by many self-help practices, yoga, meditation, all sorts of practices use elements of what I'm doing. This is just my configuration of it, which I call scanning. But I have distilled it down to what I think is the essence of the process that works for me. I very much recognize that we all have our own bodies, we all have our own thought processes. Occasionally we are able to bridge that gap and have a certain commonality with human beings. But I do recognize that this technique works for me specifically. My hope is that perhaps it works for you. Perhaps it works for others who will hear this and say, that resonates for me, that makes sense, that helps me. That's why I share it. It just seems too powerful to me not to share. It seems like such a simple technique and so helpful and so useful in my life that I just have this compulsion to share it because I can't help but feel on some level it will help others. And I'd like to help others. I'd like to do something in this world besides think about myself. I'd like to think that perhaps I could recommend a process, a technique that could help people find peace and calm in their life. And that for me is scanning. So again, scanning is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. And if you want to know the technique in a nutshell, in 1 second, squeeze your hands together, tight, 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 and release them. You just released muscular tension. That's all we're going to focus on. That's all this technique involves. You'll never have to read a book about it, attend a lecture about it. Nothing. You've learned the technique. Release muscular tension. Now we approach that release of muscular tension through various processes, which I will describe to you over the course of this, say, half-hour session, to make it simpler, to make it more accessible. But that's what we're trying to do. And we're going to talk about something else today, which I've been thinking a lot about, which relates to the release of muscular tension, and that's flow. But we will get to that in a minute. So these ideas are based, and I always give him credit because he is the source of all of this for me, a man named Thaddeus Golas, Golas, who wrote a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, in which he describes the universe as being divided into two processes: contraction, squeeze your hands together, as we just did, and expansion, release. Everything in the universe is either contracting or expanding. Our very being is a contraction, the bringing together of elements, minerals, ideas, thoughts, identity, to form the human being that we are. When we die, we will expand. We will turn to dust, dissipate, spread out into the universe until we are reformed, some of it, all of it, into another contraction. So that's all we are, contraction, expansion. So if you recognize that, and you recognize that life is a series of vacillations between a contracted state and an expanded state, and you begin to see that this applies to your own life, you can begin to identify at any given moment during the day or during your life where you are on that spectrum. Are you more contracted or more expanded? We vacillate between these two every minute of our life. My theory is that being a human being requires a lot of contraction. We have to, as the expression goes, keep it together. We work very hard to keep it together, to keep this structure that we call a human being together, to keep our mind together, to not fall apart. Falling apart is expansion. So we work very hard to contract all day, every day. We spend most of our days, nights doing that. When you become overly contracted, you become constricted. And that is when you begin to have problems. That is when you feel, simply put, bad. Things aren't working. You feel sad, painful, confused. You are overly contracted. So the process of scanning is the process of moving ourselves back towards a more balanced state, expanding until we are what we call centered, where you have equal amounts of contraction and expanded. That's called balanced. You hear these expressions again in many forms of self-help. What I'm describing to you is not something I invented. It's just my configuration of it. And if it works for you, great. If not, move on to the one that does work for you, swing dancing. These are all forms of expansion that make you feel better. But this is mine. I don't know how many more years I have on this earth, but I have recognized that I think it's very valuable, and I just wish to share it. And that's it. So because we move between contraction and expansion, and because, very important, you can't contract and expand at the same time, we want to start to expand today. In these sessions, in these scanning sessions, we're going to practice techniques that allow us to expand until we've moved ourselves into a more centered place. And we start these sessions every time with deep breaths and stillness and silence. If holding your breath is a contraction, hold your breath. That's contracted. Then releasing your breath, or taking a breath, is expansion. So we start by taking deep breaths, expansive by nature, and then sitting in moments of stillness and silence, because as opposed to being active, thinking, doing, if we become still and silent, we also begin to expand. So these are very simple techniques for expanding. If you take nothing else away from these sessions but taking deep breaths, releasing it, sitting in stillness and silence, you will have expanded yourself, however small that amount might be. And the word incremental is very crucial here. The slightest change away from contraction towards expansion is a movement on the dial and has great value. So take a deep breath and sit for stillness and silence in 15 seconds. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. I cannot begin to overemphasize the value of stillness and silence. Breath, stillness, and silence. Very often if someone will say to me, a loved one, friend, someone says, I'm just so wound up, I'm so anxious, I'm so nervous, I'll say, take a breath. Just sit for a second, don't say a word. Just sit and breathe. And very often that's enough to break the contractive cycle. Contraction begets contraction. The more contracted we get, the more we tend to think and worry and contract more, which makes us more contracted, which makes us want to contract more, etc. So if you can break the cycle of contraction, at least stop the movement, if nothing else, and then begin to move it back towards expansion, you will have gone a long way towards bringing yourself into a state of physical, emotional, and mental calm, which is the goal. Another deep breath, this time 30 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. It's amazing how infrequently we sit in absolute stillness. So you'll begin to feel, it's odd. You may feel antsy, you may feel like you want to move, but concentrate on keeping absolutely still. It's as if you've said to the universe, hang on a second. I want to really feel and hear what's going on. You're paying attention. Paying attention is a very important part of scanning, being aware of the changes in your system, being aware of what it feels like to become more expanded. So here we go again. Deep breath, 30 seconds. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. Take a moment to experience what it is to have expanded, even to the slightest degree. How do you feel different? Perhaps your mind is quieter. Perhaps your body is less agitated. Perhaps you are more comfortable in your seat. Perhaps you've forgotten where you are or why you came here or what your plan was. Perhaps none of that matters in a place of stillness and silence and nothingness. And perhaps that's the place we need to visit at least 2 or 3 times a day. The discipline of scanning is gaining the strength to win what is basically a struggle between these two forces. Through habit, we become very used to and familiar with and comforted by contraction, thinking, doing, worrying, pulling things together, trying, making an effort. That becomes our go-to space. The discipline of scanning is training yourself to not only understand, but truly believe that expansion, the opposite of contraction, nothingness, emptiness, stillness, silence, is of equal value and is worth pursuing. And you will feel your contracted self always wanting to pull you back towards contraction, and the discipline of scanning is saying, no, we're going to take a moment to expand. That's of equal value. I've been doing this many, many years, and the contractive part of my mind still refuses to believe that this is of value. Whenever I start scanning, I'm always resistant. But I'm better now because I recognize that as much resistance as I experience, and resistance is contraction, I know that on the other side, the expanded state is a place of great value, great comfort, great peace. So I will persist. And that's the discipline. As you get better at scanning, you'll get better at directing yourself into an expanded state. And you'll begin to understand that it is of great value. Last time, deep breath. This time, 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Deep, deep breath. 60 seconds. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. And again, another crucial aspect of scanning is paying attention. Paying attention. We tend to stumble through life and just react and do without really watching what it is we're doing and thinking about what we're doing. And considering whether what we're doing is actually effective or not. We just tend to be reactive. I will tell you for myself, still to this day, when I ask of myself to sit in stillness and silence, there's a part of my brain that goes, what are we doing? Why are we just sitting here? What are we doing? This isn't doing any good. Doing. We have to do something. This is a waste of time. These are all contractive thoughts. Time is a contractive process. We divide our existence into sections, hours, minutes, days, so that we can keep track of where we are in the day. We can make appointments with people. We can watch our life tick by. These are all means of control. So the concept of wasting time is a very contractive process. Time, it's valuable. We have to hold on to it. So when you sit in stillness and silence, you're really flying in the face of that process, time. You're in one sense wasting time, but in another sense, really making good use of time by bringing yourself into this expanded state. So again, the discipline of scanning is learning how to recognize where your mind and body are trying to take you, and then say, I don't have to go that way. I can go towards an expanded state. And as you begin to win that battle, you can bring yourself back to center. So that's the preliminaries. Deep breaths, stillness and silence. These are the fundamental, this is the core, this is the base of scanning. Learning to come to a place of nothingness. It's the exact opposite of what we do all day. Complete nothingness is completely expanded. Now, obviously, if you were to come really expanded, you no longer exist. Your body falls apart and you turn, as I said, to dust. We don't want to go too far one way or the other. We want to maintain center. So before we start into what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique, which is the actual incremental release of tension, muscular tension, I want to very briefly touch on the idea of flow. Again, these are concepts which I'm sure you've heard before in yoga, all sorts of practices, but this is my interpretation of it through the lens of scanning. If you imagine we are a vessel, you could say possibly a hose of some sort, a long tube through which our energy flows, through which we have life. This vessel is the tube through which our energy, the Asian sciences call it ki, flows. You are at your most effective when you have an open flow, when there are no restrictions, when your energy is allowed to just present itself to the universe without restriction. When that hose, if you were to start to tie knots around that hose, when it becomes restricted by contractive processes, your flow is interrupted. Everything becomes harder. Everything requires more effort. If you are a performer of any sort, actor, dancer, singer, if you are a writer, if you are an artist, if you are an accountant, your flow is key to your success. The problem is that in life, we contract as a means of solving problems. We come up with quote-unquote solutions. We decide to do certain things, to hold on to certain ways of doing things, to repeat them, to make them even stronger. These are all ropes around the hose which eventually begin to constrict the flow, and you find yourself ineffective at your job or your life. Again, common expression, I feel very hung up. Hung up. What's hanging you up? What's holding you? What are these restrictions? So when we scan, we're releasing muscular tension. We're letting go of so many of the structures that we've applied to our being in an effort to be effective in our life, but which have in fact constricted us. When you release muscular tension, you've let those go, the flow increases, becomes more free, and you find yourself much more, again, effective at what you do. When I've scanned in the morning before I work out, the workout is a piece of cake. It's just, what's going on here? How do I feel so strong? If I haven't scanned, it's like I'm fighting. It's like I have a metal cage around me, and I can feel that difference. So scanning, the process of scanning, will not only make you calm and more at peace, but it will make you more effective in your work and in your life. You will be less concerned with certain issues. Again, hang-ups as they call them. You will be able to just assess situations with a free and clear mind, because you will have let go of so many of the constraints you've applied to yourself. This is why so many philosophies, if you will call them, are wonderful in terms of helping you deal with your life, giving you a prism through which to see life, but they can also become a prison, which in fact cloud your vision of life. Again, they're good, contraction, as long as they're kept in conjunction with expansion. The willingness to let go of everything you think, see, and feel, if only for a moment, so that you can see clearly what really just is. So scanning, to my mind, very much helps that expansive release, that process, and thereby your flow. Okay, enough on that. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of this technique. Scanning is the incremental release of muscular tension. At its core, that is all it is. Squeeze your hands together. Tight, tight, tight. That's contraction. On my count, release that tension. 3, 2, 1, and release. Very important. That feeling, 3, 2, 1, release. That feeling of, oh, that's scanning. That's scanning. I was amazed to find, I think I began this maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago, to discover that of all the solutions I sought in my life, the simple process of muscular tension gave me the best results. They brought me to exactly the place I needed to be, to find peace and calm in my life and to be effective in my work. The simple act of muscular release. It's so simple. There's no philosophy, there's no thought process, there's no words, there's no book you need to read. All you need to know is that if I become practiced and disciplined at muscular release, my life will improve. I'll be happier. That's the only reason I started this. I wanted to be happier. God knows we have enough angst in our lives. So let's start. Squeeze your hands together. 3, 2, 1, and release. That's it. Do it again. 3, 2, 1, and release. So that's all we're going to do now. We're going to move through the body, and I'll do it rather quickly. I would normally take more time, but these sessions are instructional by nature. I highly encourage you to take as much time as you like or can in any one of these areas. we're going to begin releasing muscular tension throughout the body, incrementally, in small, tiny amounts. Any movement towards expansion, any movement of muscular release is away from contraction. You can't do both at the same time. You can't make a fist and release a fist at the same time. It's impossible. You can't squeeze your hands together and let them go at the same time. So it's so important that you realize that even the smallest amount of muscular release has value. Just doing this. You just move the dial. And you will begin to understand that small movement is valuable. Don't worry if you haven't got a half an hour to scan. Take 2 minutes. Don't worry if you're not feeling a big change. Feel a little change. Release the face on my count. 3, 2, 1, and release. You just release the muscles in your face. That's scanning. Look in the mirror if it helps. 3, 2, 1, and release. You can see it happen. I'm going to move quickly through what I call the 8 muscular zones. You can divide your body up however you like. Zone 2, the top of the head. Release the tension in the top of your head. 3, 2, 1, and release. You're looking for a feeling. All you need to do in the practice of scanning is recognize, feel that feeling. If you do, success. Top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and did you feel it? It's a slight change. It's a slight change towards expansion. The face. 3, 2, 1, and release. Take a deep breath. You've begun to expand. Let's continue to move the dial, the back of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. I snap as a means of turning off the power to that muscle. It takes power to contract a muscle. We tend to walk through our entire life, our day, our nights, holding. So what you're building is a consciousness of the fact that you can release that tension. You don't need to carry all that tension. You'd be amazed how little muscular tension you need to keep it together. We overutilize our muscles. They don't need to be used all the time. I'm holding tension right now. I've been scanning for 20 minutes. It's always there, but learn to recognize it and let it go. The back of the head. 3, 2, 1, and did you feel it? Doesn't have to be a big change, but if you felt yourself go from this to this, you did it. The neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. Now again, you'll feel an urge to take a breath as you start this process. Because if you are in a contracted state, you are holding your breath. As you begin to nudge your body into a more expanded state, as you begin to persuade your body it's safe, don't worry, it'll be okay, the body begins to give in. If you've been holding your breath, you've been deprived of oxygen on a subtle level. Part of the reason we feel fear when we're tense is we hold our breath and we literally feel like we're dying. We go into a panic because we've stopped breathing and our body is saying, this is killing me. And we become fearful. And we don't know why. And that's why sometimes a simple breath will calm you, because you're telling your body, it's okay, I got you. I'm going to give you some oxygen. We're going to let go and breathe and exist and be alive. You're safe. Deep breath. Why do we hold our breath? It's a defense. Contraction is a defense mechanism. That's fine. We need to defend ourselves. I am not criticizing contraction. It's how we get through our day. Doing, thinking, being, protecting ourselves. It's just what we're doing through scanning is reminding ourselves of the value of the opposite, expansion. The neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. The shoulders, let them drop. 3, 2, 1, and. If you felt it, you did it. It can be the most subtle change. The face. 3, 2, 1. Did you feel that release? That I can let go. I can safely let go. 5, the shoulders. 3, 2, 1, and release. Many times and I'll talk about myself, this may apply to you, am frightened by this process. Because what starts to happen when you let go? You let go of your guard. When you hold, you're constricting feelings. Feelings never go away. You can hide them, you can constrict them, you can bury them. They never go away until you release them. So you may have been holding feelings for a day, a month, a year, a decade, your life. They're all there. And you can release them however you like. If it's therapy, if it's whatever it is, if it's Rolfing. But until you release them, you will always have some part of your body that's holding. That's exhausting. That's constrictive. That restricts your flow. So when you start to scan, You begin to feel, because these feelings are not being held, they may emerge. That can be uncomfortable, frightening, whatever. Recognize that part of the reason we do hold is to protect ourselves from our own feelings. The truth of the matter is, held feelings are far more dangerous than released feelings. It's a little scary to release feelings because you feel a bit out of control, but when you hold feelings, you really harm yourself, because then you're just tying yourself up in knots. So I say this because as you begin to expand and breathe, you may begin to feel feelings of whatever kind, rage, happiness, sadness, whatever. Let them go. Shoulders, 3, 2, 1, and release. Into zone 6, the chest, stomach, front of the waist. 3, 2, 1, and release. You are learning through scanning to direct your attention to yourself. You're learning through scanning to move the dial of your own volition. Part of the reason we say, I need a drink, I need a joint, I need to get to my therapist, I need to go to the chiropractor, is because we feel these people, these forces, these chemicals will help us to release, because we begin to feel in our life so constrained that we can barely move, we can barely exist, can't think, can't talk. And so I got to get to the such, I got to have a this or that. Yes, because you're in pain. As I said, you're holding your breath, you're not breathing, you're not getting enough oxygen, you have no flow. Scanning gives you a technique. It's free, it's available, it can be used anytime, anywhere. It's simple, you know how to do it now. Told you, release muscular tension. All you need to do is practice. And it's very empowering because you no longer feel like, to save myself, I need somebody, I need something, I need some chemical. You can save yourself. So you don't feel so at risk in the world. Whatever state you're in, you go, I can get myself out of this. If only for a moment, I can get clarity. I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be in pain or uncomfortable. I can save myself. Do deep breaths, stillness, silence, muscular relief. It sounds simple because it is. Zone 7, down the back, past the waist, and into the all-important pelvis, an area in which we hold a lot of contraction, a lot of muscular clenching, area of great sensitivity. 3, 2, 1, the pelvis, and release. 3, 2, 1, and release. If you've ever gone on vacation and got to Hawaii or wherever and walked into your room and there was the bed and you put down your furniture, you lay on the bed and you went, oh, I made it. I got on the plane, I flew here, I got the taxi, I packed, I got here, I'm here, I don't have to do anything. I can relax. It's the greatest feeling in the world. I'm on vacation. I made it. I'm free of all of my constraints. Well, you can do that for yourself, anywhere, anytime. You can free yourself of your own constraints. You can free yourself of the prison you built for yourself. Just release muscular tension. People say, I need a vacation. And what I think to myself, I won't be so presumptuous to tell anyone what they need in their life, but I'll think, no, you need 5 minutes. You need 5 minutes. That's all you need, 5 minutes. And you can release so much of this tension of your own volition. Zone 7, again, down the back and into the pelvis. 3, 2, 1, and release. Now, if you're not experiencing this now, if you're just learning this, you will, through practice, begin to have the sensation of release. You'll get better and better at it. It's so simple to learn. You know how to do it now. It's so simple to practice. It is challenging to master, and it is challenging to stay with it. That is the discipline of scanning. It requires constant practice. You're habitually contracting in your life. We've done it our whole lives. That's decades built up of a form of an approach to life that you feel and believe and know works for you. To start to change that and say, there's times when I'm going to not do that. Goes against everything you may feel or believe. I'm still fighting it after many, many years of practicing scanning. When I sit down and have to let go of everything, I still am resistant to the process. It seems hard to me to believe that by letting go and doing nothing and breathing, I'm not doing anything but endangering my life, putting my life at risk. And yet I know better, so I move through that resistance. The last zone is down the legs, across the knees, and into the feet. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the feet. 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. I talk a lot in these sessions, and that's unfortunate because speech is a contraction. It's a bringing together ideas, words, to form concepts, to communicate. It's necessary in order to communicate. But ideally, when I do my own sessions, I sit in absolute stillness and silence. Not a word. For however long I can manage. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 15, sometimes a half an hour. I've done hour-and-a-half sessions. The trouble is, once you get into an expanded state, you don't want to leave it. You don't want to leave it, so you'll stay there. You're going to want to stay there. But what's amazing is, as good as it may feel, when I'm done, I'll go right back to my contractive life, which I need to. You have to. That's how you live your life. You do things. You make appointments. You say things. If I'm an actor, I act. If you're a dancer, you dance. If you're an accountant, you account. If you're a contractor, you build. That's contraction. As long as we begin to remember that we need balance in our life, and that occasionally, maybe once or twice a day, we bring ourselves into an expanded state through the incremental release of muscular tension until we are centered again or balanced. That's all we're doing, is trying to have a centered, balanced life. Because then life can be pretty great. And that's it. Thank you for visiting. It's called Sqanning, the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. If this did not resonate for you, if you said, what? I didn't feel anything. What's he talking about? Practice. Keep practicing. Put aside 15 minutes a day to do something completely different than anything else you do in your day, and that's nothing. 15 minutes to let go of everything you hold so tightly and so dearly to. 15 minutes. Try it. Just as an experiment, and see where it takes you. And you'll begin, I hope, to experience the benefits of this process, which I call Sqanning. There's also a Sqanning Facebook page. I put these on my Facebook page for a day or so, then I delete them. But the Sqanning Facebook page, Sqanning, has a lot of previous sessions. They're all basically the same, though. I just do it truthfully as a means of reminding myself and communicating to you in the hopes that it is perhaps of benefit to you as well. That would make me very happy, as does Sqanning. Thanks a lot. Have yourself a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.